have a client that I'm working with right now, and this is at an independent living facility, which is basically a senior apartment with like meals and things. And I'm working with her twice a week, and I wanted to discuss some things with her daughter and share some information. This woman has some memory problems, and she told me that she's on vacation right now, so don't bother her. And if I call the family while I'm with the client, then that's, part of my treatment time, which is something that I'm pushed to do, right? I have to meet productivity standards as an occupational therapist working in healthcare. And and she's like, please don't call her while she's on vacation. So I have a rapport with this woman. I wanted to maintain that. So I have never talked to the daughter before. I had no idea what she would be like. So then she came off vacation and I said, can I call your daughter? And she's like, sure. So I called the daughter, and the daughter's so easy to talk to. She's like, she wouldn't have been bothered if I had called her while she was on vacation because she was like, well, she texts me all the time while I'm gone. And um, they're from Pennsylvania, so it's kind of funny because I feel like we get each other. In fact, she talks like one of my aunts. She's got a little bit of a Eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey accent going on. And so, yeah, she wants to know. She's like, let me know what we can get for mom. I want you to know cost is not an option. We can buy things for her. Yeah, we want to support her. I talked about some of the issues I was seeing, and she's like, yeah, and she's on top of things. She's like, yeah, with her, she's on chronic antibiotics for urinary tract infections because that can be a sign of confusion. And she goes, with her, we've discovered it's her potassium is low. If she's not drinking enough water, then that can cause things. And so she's real informed. She's very grateful for me sharing all this information and wants to know what she can do to help her mother. And then I get her connected with, we have a portal system where I can send a message and she can reply back. Um, and so I get connected with that. And she's been like one of the easiest family members to work with and communicate with. And we talked about her decline in cognition and maybe mom needs more support now. And when I first talked to the daughter, she said, she's resistant to this. There's a caregiver agency that can come in and they can help with medications, but in order to do so, that medicines have to be in a locked box. It's just a regulation. And mom resisted that, and mom resisted this and that. And so after my talking with the daughter, I came back and the daughter had set up additional caregiver services. And I go in, I'm like, how are you doing today? I'll call her Jenny. She's like, not so good. I'm not doing well. Now I have people coming in, and she has a hard time finding her words. So it sounds more like it takes a while for her to say these things. And she said that they're coming in and they're doing everything for me. And I said, so, they get your clothes out for you and they're helping making sure you take your medicine right. I said, but you still get yourself dressed. She's like, no, they dressed me. Um, and there's kind of this defeated look on her face, like, and she has an awareness that she's not doing as well. I think she has a good rapport with her daughter, but she just seems kind of defeated by it. Um, so that led me to more communication with the daughter because the caregiver agency, there are caregivers, and these are not even nursing assistants. So a personal caregiver doesn't have to have that kind of background. There are some that are good about allowing people to do what they can for themselves and letting them initiate and, here's your clothes, seeing if they can put them on. And others just think, oh, I'm here to help you. I'm going to do everything for you, not realizing how much independence that takes away from a person and how much it's going to contribute to a further decline in their ability if you do everything for them. So I've really developed a neat communication with the daughter and sharing information with her and finding things out because I also don't know when someone has cognitive impairment. They're telling me things, but I don't know 100% what the truth is and what's not the truth. And, this all stemmed from this person who's like, don't bother my daughter. She's on vacation. I don't want you to bother her. And that was more about her not wanting to burden her daughter. And so, hello.
This is Don.
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family.
Today's podcast is number 219, and we're talking about just kind of what you were talking about right there is, will I be a burden on my kids at some point in life, and that talks just about it, feeling guilty because they're having things done for them. And am I cognitive enough to do some of these things
Well, and just
instead of,
and that generation typically, I mean, baby boomers, but even older than that, they don't want to be a burden on their kids.
Mhm.
And they have this idea and they tell me, "Oh, I don't want to burden my kids." And it got me thinking, do the kids realize that they're saying these things? Are the kids telling them I don't have time for you, or is it just their perceptions of it? So it got us kind of talking about this subject, and Don looked up some great articles that kind of talk about these topics. So I look forward to this conversation today.
But I got a couple of jokes for you.
Okay.
And these are a little bit corny, but let's give them a try anyway, huh? Um, so did you hear about the kid that ate a frog? His mom was worried he's going to croak. And when does a regular joke become a mom joke? When the punchline is apparent. And there's one other one here. Oh, here's one. What did the buffalo say to her son as he left to school?
Wait, what did the buffalo say to her son as he left for
To school,
school?
yes.
I don't know.
Bye, son.
Bye, son. I'm curious why that one joke said become a mom joke because you hear
I know.
dad jokes all the time, but you never hear the phrase mom joke.
Well, because I found it under mom jokes, so I guess they put that on there, but
But really, it's
it could be any parent for that
well, you
matter. Yeah.
hear that, it's a dad joke.
Yeah.
Dad jokes. You have a book called Dad Jokes and stuff, so they just changed that. That's funny. Um,
So, and then what I was going to come up once again, we're using the Caregiver 101 guide.
hold it steady so it'll zoom in and actually see it.
Yeah, I went off of the screen for a
You
second
have to put it in
myself.
front of your face because it's gonna in front of your face
Yeah.
and
Is it?
don't move. Hold it still. Nope, it's still blurry.
I'm not moving.
Well, it's yeah,
Yeah, I don't know why it.
its focus is on you,
Yeah, I know.
not the book. Anyways,
So
it's
there it
called
is. There it is.
Caregiver 101 by Mike Collins.
The 101 ways to keep caregiving from making you crazy. And this just made me crazy. All right. This is tip number 72. And we were talking about burdens today. And this is talking about caregivers and finding someone to listen to them. But I thought since we're talking about this, we're talking about somebody that's feeling guilty about things, feeling they probably need somebody to talk to. The children caring for them and stuff like that. But anyway, I wanted to read it anyway. Again, it's finding a good listener. Find a friend for whom you can talk about your problem, but don't wear out your welcome. Be willing to listen to their issues too. Good way to vent is to call or go to a friend and say, I need to vent for about 10 minutes. Just listen. At the end of 10 minutes, stop and ask them uh, suggestions. Oh my gosh, I messed up. Stop me. And if you have any suggestions that would appreciate hearing them. Also, remember that as crazy it may sound, pets are great listeners, and you don't have to listen to their problems at all.
It's interesting that you say that about pets because we have a lot of people who want to bring their pets to independent living, and that's something you can do even at assisted living places. And sometimes people are like, oh, but they take so much care, and then you've got to do this and you got to do that. And yet, the value of them having someone to care for and having that pet as a companion is wonderful. And you can't just, they don't realize, they think, oh, this is too much work for you. And
But it's not, you're really not much more than
well,
taking
but
care of a child.
no, but I mean, these are people that are seniors and
Yeah,
need assistance and stuff. But maybe do you pay for a caregiver to come in and clean the litter box or walk the dog, if you can't, because it is really great companionship
yeah. Just
for people. But
having a person around let alone talking to them. But
yeah, I have a client, he had a stroke and it affected his speech. So he understands things. He can communicate writing. He can get some sounds out, but if he really wants to tell me something and he can't gesture it, he's got to write it, but he understands everything. But he's got a dog. And so we communicate by talking about the dog and he laughs and and it's just, it makes for easier conversation with someone who can't actively speak very well. But it's, the dog is utilized as, I'll talk to Molly, I'll say. I don't know, Molly, and he laughs and I don't know. It just makes for a neat connection.
So one of the first things I took up was this one. It talks about why parents feel they're being a burden. And I thought I'd list the items and we can talk more. We can go into detail on it. But
Yeah, I kind of like, yeah, the other thing that you found. Okay.
yeah,
So
well, I want to
this
go over
idea,
this and then we can go
this
to,
idea of, yeah, why, it says 50% of aging parents say they're worried about being a burden
you know,
to their children. So even us, Generation X people, not quite there yet, but think about this for the future and then think about yourself. Do you want to be a burden to your kids and what does that mean? And then think about maybe a parent that you're taking care of.
yeah.
Because
So,
we might tell them, well, just don't. No, you're not a burden, but it's not that simple.
well, and the first thing they talk about is, they're worried about complicating your already busy life, so they're worried about you. They talk about, you never give up being a parent. And so the worry continues on, so they're worried about saying too much to you and getting you to worry about it, you
Yeah.
know. The second one, they talk about they're afraid that by asking for help, they're losing control. And you were talking about that earlier about that. And one thing that came into mind, and it was kind of the opposite of what we talked about, but way back, I don't know, I was moved away at the time, but I was thinking about my mom through the holidays, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if I hired somebody in to come clean their house, And so I looked up different companies, I talked with them and figured out somebody that might be good. And I decided to send it, I ordered, I think, one or two different visits at least, and I mentioned it like the day before they were going to come because I didn't want them to scare her or anything. And she got very upset. What do you mean? I don't need anybody clean my, she got real defensive about it. She let the one come because I already ordered it, but you don't need, I don't, I couldn't believe how upset she got over it, because she was so worried about, is she, I think the kind of the idea of, am I losing control? Is this
Yeah.
going to be the burden that I'm going to have to take
And it
on,
can be, is you telling me I'm not good at cleaning my house? It could be
Well,
an
yeah, that's the other.
insult. She could be don't want people in her house that she doesn't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
your mom would be 100 if she was living, so she's of the
Yeah, she
silent
would.
generation or whatever.
Well, your mom
Um,
even talked about not really wanting people around the house and all that. Um, and then the last one they talk about, they're concerned that you'll worry too much.
yeah. Yeah, if I tell you this, then you're going to be all worried and you got enough on your plate to worry about, and I don't want to cause you concern. The beginning of this article, it it quotes an author, Michelle Hansen, who wrote an article, and she said that parents are meant to help support their children, not become an intolerable burden upon them, especially when they're struggling. So just this idea that I'm your parent and I'm supposed to help you. You're not supposed to help me. And so it's this mindset.
Well, is she talking about the up? Because what I heard you say, she's talking about not being the burden, but we're really talking about opposite of it, aren't we?
The opposite of it.
Well, what the way you said it, it was talking about parents shouldn't be the burden
Well,
on
yeah, it's that idea that they have.
yeah,
It's the idea that they feel that,
yeah,
when, think about us raising our children, right? We tell them, don't worry about us, take care of you. We have a kid who worries about finances, and I'm like, that's my responsibility. It's not yours. So this is how we raise our kids, but then when they're adults as well, you know, we we still see them as kids, especially older generations, even though they're grown and have their own family, their own job. You know, I have people all the time that tell me, they're treating me like a child, and some are like they get that they need help now, but others are very, I'm still your mother. It
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
matter. I am still your mother, and you're not going to tell me how to do things. And it kind of comes from this idea that it's not
We
just an
set on this idea.
arrogance, but it's just my job is to help you.
Yeah.
Your job is not to turn around and help me. And this generation, like baby boomers and older, their parents, going back a little bit, they didn't live long enough to reach these ages. You think about dementia and how common it is
Yeah.
now. That part of that reason is because people didn't live that long before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the average age that both women and men live is so much older now than it used to be,
Yeah.
that people died younger and you weren't dealing with these kinds of things. They died shortly after retirement sometimes or
Or even
before.
before. Yeah.
And so as people are living longer and we have the medical ability to extend lives longer, even with multiple health conditions, we're seeing, yeah, people needing more assistance. So there's compounding factors there involved, and different generations have different ways of looking at things and dealing with things. I realize that, people say that all the time. I don't want to be a burden to my kids. Um, and sometimes their kids are telling them, I don't have time. I don't have time. And then I started thinking, well, how often is it the kids saying that? Or is it just they feel that way? They don't want, and they
Well,
don't
yeah,
want
there's
to
that.
feel, because I'm like, does my mom think that way? Does she not share things with me because, she knows how busy I am with lots of things in my life? And it's like, but I want her to ask me for help and tell me things she needs.
Yeah.
So it got me thinking a little bit kind of about it. We joke to our oldest son who has his own house and, is living on his own, has a good job, that when we get older, he's going to take care of us, and as we are getting older, he kind of, his eyes get real big. And it's like, no, we don't want to assume that he's going to take care of us. And he's certain to, we have to scale back on what we're saying. You've had multiple health
Hmm.
problems, and this is looking more like the future is coming as far as us being older. And,
Well, you also, think about having this idea of it, living with this idea that where kind of way you were raised, but I think it works in, when we get, I don't, I don't go back to my home anymore, but when I get back at home, you kind of fall back into that place,
Yeah,
and
and that role, like
that
when,
role,
I mean,
yeah.
your brother's like
Still even
you're the
now.
little brother, and sometimes I look at the things they say to you, and I'm like, you're still their little brother,
Yeah,
and then you kind of fall in line, or you act
yeah,
differently around your parents sometimes, and we live far away from immediate family. Well, when I moved to Charlotte, my parents were still in Pennsylvania, and so we were not like around family all the time the way some people are that live close. So I don't know
and
how that's different for people who've kind of always lived close to their family. I'd be curious. It'd be a fun discussion to have with some
yeah,
people, um, if there's a difference there. But so yeah, there's our perspective on things, there's theirs perspective on things, and there's our reality, there's their reality, and it kind of boils down to communication, right, Don? Are we making assumptions? They're making assumptions.
yeah,
There's unspoken rules. There's things that just some families, we just don't talk about this. We don't, this is not, and it can be culturally different as far as how things are looked at. I've worked with people of some different cultures that come from other countries, and only their family member is going to help them get dressed. They're not going to have a stranger in there helping
yeah.
them get dressed in the morning. And as an occupational therapist, so I'm thinking, this is when I did short-term rehab. We have to keep those cultural considerations in mind. And so, you can even have that varied even with people, born and raised in the United States and, generations of living in the United States. But it can be even more so with other cultures. But there's different ways of people doing things, and sometimes it may not be the healthy way. How can we incorporate better communication strategies, or but also respecting, it's a fine line of, figuring out the communication.
Well, I think the idea too of, we talk about my brothers and kind of not talking down to me necessarily, but kind of put me back as a child. But the fact that I'm quite a distance from them, they're around each other more often, and they see changes. They don't see that in me. They
Um,
can't.
that
So
that
there's
could be
some
part
of
of
that. I'm
it.
not saying that's all of it, but it's some of it that they're not seeing my daily life of, getting up, going to work, doing all this stuff.
Right. So when you talk to them, yeah. And you were quite a bit younger.
Yeah.
You were a family of six. The sibling closest to your age died as a child, and so they're literally 5 years older than you. What,
Well,
8,
12's the
10,
oldest, I think,
12? Well,
something like that.
um, but yeah, right. And so like, um,
Well, and the other thing that with the list we talk about, we haven't gone through the other part of this, but the one that, you asked me if I was, I guess, relating to any of this or understand, the one that really got me was this feeling the mortality.
hmm,
I that has, well, going through what I've gone through in my life, you kind of, it tends to stick to you a little bit more. And so when I read that one, that's the one, and it doesn't, they talk about it, sometimes it's kind of like hangs on you after a while. I don't think about it that often, but it still comes a lot closer as you get older to what mortality is like and what that could be like.
makes you more aware of that. Like, teenagers feel invincible, and
Yeah.
that's where their brain's at developmentally. That's how they take chances. That's how they build their independence. Um, and yeah, when you're older and you see the reality and people around you your age are dying and having, cancer and different things happening, that it puts a different perspective on life. Before we go to the end of this first article, we jump to the second article and then come back to this one. I'm talking to Don here.
Well, you want to go with this one with the 11 different things.
So the other article
That's
Don
fine.
found
Well, I mean,
is
that's what I was talking about because that's number 7 on that
okay.
list that you know. So
So the
anyway,
other article you found is people who feel empty as they get older. There's usually 11 reasons that people feel empty. So now we're kind of looking at the loneliness factor of older people and what reasons contribute to them feeling lonely. And so there's a connection here with, the feeling like a burden. Um, it talks about as people get older, they could feel empty and full of regrets. And just looking behind the reasons behind these feelings. And the first one is loss of identity or purpose in life. So it talks about, when we're young, we have big dreams and goals that we want to achieve. But as the years pass, our timeline gets shorter, and that can cause anxiety in people, um, and their daily activities, finding new purpose. And then when I read this, I thought about people come to us all the time, independent living, and they move out of their home. And so it's like moving to an apartment, and meals are provided. And, so they don't have their house to keep up anymore. They don't have a yard to keep up anymore. They, maybe they're told not to drive anymore. And so they have the sense of they need a purpose. And we've got one guy, he's going to be 95 this summer. He's always helping other people. Um, and it's like he needs that purpose. He's still driving to the store. We're all concerned about that because he does have cognitive issues. He helps other people who need help. There's people that can't see very well with vision deficits and helps them back to their room. This is a man, I assessed him for therapy, and he's standing in the shower. And I talked about, a shower chair could be safer and reduce your fall risk. And he laughs and he goes, maybe when I get older. He's 94 years old.
I love that. I mean,
um, and we're like, oh, he shouldn't be helping these other people. He's got his own problems. But no, he wants a sense of purpose. There was another lady that moved in, and she would go down to the activities director and she would ask her, what can I do to help you? And, obviously the activity director could find plenty of things that she could do and help set up. And so we see that all the time. And as an occupational therapist, people say, I'm retired. I don't need a job. Well, how do you occupy your
yeah.
time? And having a purpose and hobbies is such a big part of it. And sometimes it was just keeping the house clean, doing the yard work, not having that in itself. What is the purpose? What are they doing? They're just getting up and going to meals and taking their medicine and going to bed. They often feel they need more than that. And so we talk about that all the time and in the therapy department and helping people to have purpose and meaning. And it can be more difficult for some people than others.
Wouldn't it be nice to like have a farm and be able to turn it in and have people there and they could do whatever they can as far as the farming goes, and I'll have some chores to kind of.
Well, and if you're looking at facilities for an aging loved one, or my dad went to an adult daycare, so that's a place where they go, they have activities for them, but it was Montessori based. So if you know anything about Montessori education, it's kind of child-led, interest-led. They have stations, they can move at their own pace. So that's how this caregiving place was set up for people with dementia. And they had gardening they could work on. They had a little garden outside. They had, if they liked painting, they'd set up an easel and paints for them. They had different stations. My dad was tired. They let him lay down and put on his favorite music that he liked.
Mm.
And the people felt they talked about having meetings and being part of the discussion. So my dad thought he was on the board, which was okay because it gave him that sense of purpose, and they let them decide things and get ready for meals and giving them that those jobs and things, even with people with dementia who needed more help than they thought they did, just setting the environment up to allow them to feel productive and like they're getting to make their own choices.
I
It's a
mean, they're doing that.
powerful.
They're doing that with my sister. She's in a daycare, and she tells them they talk to her about she need when she goes to work. Oh, my battery's gonna die. But
Yeah, she has.
because she I talked to her today, but she didn't talk about. But the last time I talked to her, she was like, I don't know about this going to work thing. I thought I gave this up, but they really need me, so I should go in. No,
So
that's
that's
like,
for and to get her to go there.
yeah,
She was a nurse practitioner, so she feels like she's going to work, but that gives her a sense of
um,
it makes sense to her, right?
yeah,
People don't want to go to a daycare center that's, they call them adult care centers. They don't want to think about it that way. But it can be a great relief for someone who wants to keep their loved one at home, but they can't just leave them. And it can be extra work to take them places, or they need, and so knowing they're in good hands, even if it's a couple hours a day,
yeah.
it could be a couple days a week, it could be 5 days a week. And especially, you think about a married couple, with my mom and dad, it was like when she had to be his caregiver, they just constantly together and having to do everything together. And he just felt like she was telling him, you can't do this, you can't do that, because his hobbies were all so physical. And with his Parkinson's and stuff, it was just not safe for him to
Yeah.
do his hobbies anymore. And it made it challenging. So, it gave him space to go there and it gave my mom space, but, it can be a great opportunity. And yeah, and finding what works. And, it's okay to say you're going to work, or, you're volunteering and you're helping them out, or whatever whatever they're comfortable with, like run with it. That gives you an opportunity. Someone said recently to something to me about they felt the need to correct every time someone thought, oh, it was someone whose their spouse had died and the patient's dementia had advanced, and they're like, where's Henry? Where's he at? And the first time she told him, "Oh, he died years ago." And then she got all upset and disappointed. And she realized, you know, she just, oh, he's not here yet. He'll be here later. And at first people were like, you can't do that. Or other family members were saying, you're lying to her. You can't do that. And it's like, no, in her mind, he's still alive. And so to have to relive that every time, that doesn't serve them. Someone who's got degenerative disease like this, their cognition is not going to get better. And it's not going to help them to keep repeating, they're dead, they're not here anymore.
No, well, that was like last night in the movie. The father was asking what time her mother was coming, and her mother had been dead for some time, and she said, "Oh, it'll probably be about 4:30." And I thought that was, she didn't realize how important it was to be able to kind of stay in his world, and give that time and not tell her that she's dead, like you say. So, yeah, I thought that was really, uh,
Trying to
she,
remember the name of the movie, Don.
yeah,
And I can't think of the movie we watched
yeah,
last
I know that's.
night.
We'll have to review that one at some
Yes, if
point
you didn't
because
listen to our podcast last week, we talked about we're looking at movies and TV shows and things in the and that are incorporating the idea of the sandwich generation and caring for aging loved ones. And so it's just a fun thing.
it's the best you can
Oh yes.
with Kevin Bacon and his wife
Kira Sedgwick.
Yeah, so it was kind of
And they're not
interesting.
playing a married couple, but it was a really neat piece that talks about, yeah, we'll have to review that one. But the one we talked about in the podcast last week was Mayim Bialik's first written and produced movie that was loosely based on her life. Um, I'm forgetting the name of it.
So uh, as you made us,
As you
as
made
you
us, as you made us.
so
Yeah,
I'm remembering this.
yeah,
I'm good.
yeah.
I'm getting better here. So, well,
Um,
the next one on here is social isolation, and we've
sure.
kind of talked about this quite a bit, but that's ge- we don't realize, like I say, as you get older and your family moves out, and friends, some of them die and or move on, and without something to be able to get that socialization in, it can be
And if they can't
difficult.
drive anywhere,
Yeah.
it can lead to feelings of loneliness. And it says, in this article, it says it can have a negative impact on their mental health. It can also have a negative impact on their physical health. Um, and this can, anxiety, depression can be really common in people, even people, that you would never imagine they'd have an issue with depression, but these things can contribute to that. It can also return to substance abuse.
Mm.
With people drinking in order to cope with it, or even sometimes other painkillers or whatever.
Well, and it leads to the next one, which is health challenges, because as we if we get depressed, if we're going to fight or flight, and it can start causing some illnesses, and plus you stop maybe even caring about yourself at a certain point if you're that
Yeah.
that lonely or whatever.
And it talks about as we get older, and this is what I mentioned earlier, people are living longer. People would die of things years ago, pneumonia, different things, diabetes, and they're living longer with these challenges, these health challenges happening, arthritis, um, chronic pain, other health issues, and those can lead to that feeling of lack of control, the emptiness, feeling like they're not able to maintain the lifestyle of what they were able to do before. And
Well, one of the things I noticed in a patient I was working with, um, they they had been healthy all their life, going raising their kids and doing all this stuff, and just about the time they retired, everything kind of fell apart. And I started thinking about it, that what they did was they were living in a place with all the challenges, all the things going on. One, they weren't taking care of themselves. They lived in a lot of stress through their life. And it finally I caught up with them in a way, which is not good at that age, and to be able to try to get out of that. We talked a lot about that, and of course we tapped our way through it too. But
there's another side to that. Like I've worked with people and that they don't fall or get injured until they retire. And I'm sure there's a component of it is that feeling like they have a purpose.
yeah,
And also just even going to work, even if you're sitting at your job, the activity level, it's changed. I try to explain that to people all the time, even if they lived at home and didn't go anywhere. Well, you walked around the house, you got, you made yourself meals, even if it was just getting a thing out of the freezer and heating it up. You had to open the refrigerator up. You had to take it out. You had to put it in the microwave. You had to carry it to the table. Like if you're, people that come to rehab, they fell, they broke their leg, or even if they just were sick with pneumonia and they're recovering, like I can do all those things. I did all those things at home before. I can do them. They don't realize the impact on their endurance
yeah.
that it has. And it's like, you were doing it before, but right now people are handing you your clothing. People are bringing you your meals. Your physical activity has been cut in half or more compared
Mhm.
to what you were doing. And the older we are, the slower it is to recover. What the way they say for every 1 day in bed, it's 3 days to recover. It could be longer for elderly people, but that lack of activity, it takes time to build that back up. Think about if you're I know our listeners might be of varying ages, but if you're like Dot and I, somewhere between 50 and 70, when you get sick now and you feel yucky, then you try to go take your walk and you're a little more winded or what, depending on what your prior activity level is. But add that to different medical complexities in being in the hospital and not allowed to be up and moving around, um, it can have a big impact on that functioning. I'm trying to circle back around to what we were first talking about because I'm going off on tangents here because there's just so much to talk about here. Um, you
I mean,
know,
we might have to make this into like a two, three parts because
well, yeah,
there's so
we
much to
could
every bit of
expand
it.
upon it in finer details, but so thinking about those things and those health challenges, the next one talks about cognitive decline. And again, another area of my expertise here. It can cognitive decline can also change people's personalities.
Mm.
And so your fun-loving mother now with dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever is acting out, saying mean things, acting differently, the part of the brain can be affected. We see this a lot with there's something called frontotemporal dementia. And that part of our brain controls our impulse control, our personality, and all different kinds of things. You see those with strokes that affected that area of the brain. Um, and so now you're dealing with someone who doesn't seem like the person that they were. And that can make it more challenging on them, as well as on the caregiver, right, who's caring for them. And the other things is having regret. It talks about people, they have more time. So they're reflecting on things
Yeah.
from their past, unresolved issues. Yeah, when you have more time to think about these things. And, we reflect more as we get older and thinking about things in the past and how we could do things differently. And what I wanted to add to this, what they talk about is that that could lead to people being angry and acting out or withdrawing. So you might not know they're regretting things. They might not say, I'm having regrets now, but they're reacting in a way, and that's where tuning into behavior and improving communication makes such a difference to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And changes in family dynamics. Um,
That has a lot of avenues to it too, because it could be a lot, could be a death, it could be people moving out, or like we talked about the fly. Remember we did a podcast on them coming back,
yes.
they leave and they come back.
And so not only that change, but also talking about, when you have kids who rely on you or friends who rely on you, and now all of a sudden they're not there, or you live somewhere where things are taken care of, that being needed,
Mm,
it can let not having that anymore. No one needs me anymore. I tell our kids this, I deal with depression and they know that and they don't want to bother me when I'm dealing with that. And I'm like, still reach out to me. It helps me to help other people. It's kind
yeah,
of, it helps me to feel needed. Um, Feeling their mortality,
yeah,
just realizing you have limited time and want to make the most of it. This eight is a big one, loss of autonomy,
yeah,
having control over what we do. I see that all the time. I see that, in multiple areas where I work. We've seen it with our own family members, just feeling out of control and wanting to have a say in their life. And this can lead to, yeah, and out of control says of your own actions, but also decisions. People start making decisions for you.
yeah.
And think about yourself, if you're listening to this podcast, you're middle aged, whatever, your kids, even if they're not grown yet, what would you want as you get older? Can you put yourself in the shoes of your parent or your grandparent and think about what if that's me down the road? And for anyone who says, no, that's not going to happen to me, you don't know what's in your future. You can take absolute, really good care of yourself
Hmm.
and be hit by a car and suffer a brain injury. Some freak accident can happen. You could have underlying health problems that you don't know about, like Don experienced. His first heart attack caught us all totally off guard. Um, and so we don't know. We don't know what the future holds. And so, really stopping to think about yourself and what would I want in this situation and how can I do this differently? Um,
You might want to listen back to our the one we talked with the long-term care person, but getting
Yeah,
yourself.
we've had lots of other podcasts that cover similar topics as this. So if these are hitting on a nerve, you can search keywords, right, to find one of our former podcasts. Is that correct, Don? Can they put
Yeah,
keywords in into a search?
they can go down and even in YouTube you can search under that.
And
So
you can reach out to us because we can help direct you to other podcasts and other information. They talk about being ignored. Um,
I mean, I think about that too, that because we kind of oh, we got somebody coming to the door. Sorry, I just see him coming. The kids are
our little office area is right at the front of our house with big windows, and Don can see the front porch where they deliver things to.
no, it's our kids.
Oh, yes.
Our family
Our
is
kids who
showing up.
don't live here, we're doing a podcast. We'll be done soon. Come on in. Be comfortable. Um, well, did I say that too soon?
I'll try to
We're
cut this
recording our
part.
podcast. We'll be done soon. So, talking about managing generations of stuff.
We're talking about being ignored. It's
Well, and it's interesting. I read this. When health issues, cognitive decline, and other aspects of aging come into play, it's easy for younger people to move on with their lives, ignoring their elderly loved ones, and unaware of the loneliness and emptiness that they left behind. The aging family member might be a shell of their former self. I just had to like stop when I read that. They are not a shell. They may look like, you may think they're a shell of their former self.
yeah.
They may act like that, but they are still, and the movie we watched last night, you think someone with dementia and they can't talk and communicate, but sometimes you can ask them about their past and what they did in their life and things they enjoyed. And there's ways to do this when people can't speak either, but
Well,
still a human in there, and there is still, a whole person.
I mean, they had that book. Remember that she the
Well, he was able to talk.
yeah,
He was able to still communicate. So
but still,
sometimes you get people.
the stuff he came out with
And he
it
was able to,
was
and that's often the thing. They can relive the past, but not current memories. And yeah, engaging with them because they are not a shell of their former self. I had to argue with that point on there, but realizing that they've lived a whole life, and you can still, it's like if you having kids around, whether they're grown or younger, ask grandma about this, ask grandma
mm,
about if she ever shot a gun, or ask grandma, giving them an opportunity to connect with them because there is still a lot. They're more than a shell. So to touch on the other things here, exclusion, if someone is physically limited with what they can do, then people might not, invite them to something. And the other aspect of it is if you turn them down and say no, I can't go, well then people might stop asking you
yeah.
to go. Or, um this really touched on me when people like I don't want to bother you. You're struggling, you have a and I think about this like with my parents or just anyone caring for somebody else, and you're like, people will be like, "Oh, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to interfere." And a lot of times reach out because they might need that. They can let them decide what they can and can't do, right? They
Yeah.
they might like just that connecting, that reaching out. And when you're avoiding people thinking it's too much on them or they can't do it, what can they do? Um, um,
Well, and the last one is kind of what we started to talk about with this, and I think it's something that we need to go back to that first article and probably expand on this, like I said.
yeah, the
And
first article talked about, why parents feel like they're being a burden, and it talks about what you should look for and how to handle it.
yeah,
Um, it says there's a balance between respecting your parents' right to privacy, um, and encouraging them to communicate with you in case of an emergency, and as far as important health information. So again, it goes back to communication, and you can't demand all the information, but finding a way to get information to help them and letting them know, in order for me to help you. The cat just came through the curtain. Um, um, threw me off there, sunshine. What you should look for, paying attention to your parents? Are they getting bruises because they're bumping, they're falling and not telling people? A lot of times they won't want to let anyone tell. Are they having money troubles? Is something happening that could be a sign of a cognitive decline? Um, they might have that feeling that they don't want to be a burden, and so they're doing things to put themselves in danger and not, asking for help. We've talked about that before. Um, so setting things up ahead of time. If your parent doesn't want to talk about it, say, how about, your grandson can come once a week and take you where you need to go. They'll be here at this time. So if you don't have anywhere to go, you can just go for a ride. Like setting things up for them, incorporating ways to help them. And it boils down to how you communicate and how you offer that help. Um, so there's a lot more we can talk about here, and we certainly will
I think we will, yeah, do
in
another.
more episodes. Because yeah, just thinking about it from those two different perspectives is we have to realize whoever we're caring for, our parent, they're a different person. They had different life experiences, and we need to respect that. Um, and finding ways to communicate, just recognizing these things and how it can affect their health. And if your parent says, I don't want to be a burden to you, and you say, you're not a burden, don't worry about that, that's not going to make it go away. They still have that feeling, and you
Yeah.
can't just tell them not to. It's like, don't be so sad, cheer up, be happy. Um, so, thank you for joining us today. That's our podcast for today. Focused Healthy Family. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with anyone you know who might benefit from it, as well as all of our other podcasts. We've covered a variety of topics. If stress, panic, or overwhelm are beginning to interfere with your daily routine, consider Don's EFT Discovery series. I've talked too much today. EFT tapping is often described as weird, but wow, this works when they learn about it. So check that out. For wellness tips, caregiver resources, and more episodes, visit focusedhealthyfamily.com or focusedhealthyfamilypodcast.com. You can connect with us on social media. Facebook, Instagram is Focused Healthy Family One, YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. If you're listening to this podcast, you can also view and or listen on YouTube and see our silly antics. And if you're watching it on YouTube, you can pull it up anywhere you pull up a podcast and listen to it while you're driving in the car. Know that Don is available to speak to organizations, caregiver groups, healthcare teams, and community groups about practical ways to reduce stress and build resilience in caregiving environments. For more information about booking Don to speak at your location, please reach out to schedule a presentation or a workshop. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.